Amy's going to run the show here. Let me introduce you to Amy Sangiolo. Is an attorney, community advocate, and former Newton City Councilor who represented Ward 4 for more than 20 years. She currently serves as the 11th Middlesex State Representative, where she works to advance policies benefiting both Newton and the Commonwealth. Amy's also run for mayor. Don't I know it? Underscoring her deep commitment to public service, this afternoon, she brings her wealth of experience and fairness to the role of moderator, and we thank you for being here.
Okay. So we're going to start with introductions. Molly Brodt, a former teacher turned mental health counselor, is a longtime advocate for equity, inclusion, and student well-being. With 3 daughters in Newton Public Schools, she is deeply committed to supporting students' emotional and academic growth through strong, inclusive, and equitable public education. Welcome, Molly.
Thank you.
Jonathan Greene is a Newton native, NPS graduate, and parent of Bowen 4th grader. He is the Chief Digital and Technology Officer at a large building products distributor and previously worked at Wayfair and Bain & Company. Jonathan brings broad leadership experience in finance, operations, and technology to his campaign for school committee in Ward 6. He is focused on ensuring students get a consistent experience throughout the Newton schools, making sure NPS is an exceptional place to build a career as an educator and bringing innovation to the schools. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you.
So we'll start. I just wanted to preface this, that the area councils, the 4 area councils conducted a survey and found that residents are most concerned with how our city is managed and how those decisions affect our public schools. They cited issues of curriculum, standards, safety, transportation, and teacher compensation. But above all, they asked how we can sustain educational excellence. These are engaged Newton voters participating in this election. So let's begin. And I'll start with the first question with you, Molly. How are you different from your opponent as it relates to your future actions and goals on the school committee if you're elected?
I think we differ in our experience, our perspective, and our approach. So my experience in my career has been all in education. I was a classroom teacher in middle school for 16 years, and now I'm a mental health counselor in elementary school. So I know schools, I know what happens in policy decisions, how it affects classrooms, how it affects teachers, how it affects students. My perspective is also varied because, although we both have students or children in Newton Public Schools, I've also worked in many different schools, and so I have a variety of experience in different schools. And my approach is one of collaboration and inclusivity, and I think it's really important to make sure that we bring every stakeholder to the table to make decisions about Newton Public Schools.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Thank you. As Molly addressed, we come from relatively different backgrounds from a professional experience standpoint. I have spent 20 years in business coming to this opportunity. I grew up in the Newton schools. I'm proud of my Newton education. I think about the role of school committee representative as being a member of the community and being a member of the board of the Newton Public Schools. There are 4 primary responsibilities for the school committee, managing the superintendent, managing the budget, negotiating the union contract. All of those things are things that are quite familiar to me as an executive, and I think I bring a really high quality understanding of what parents and voters in the city want out of the schools and an ability to reflect that back in the policy decisions that we're making.
Thank you. Would you like to do a follow-up?
No. Thank you.
Okay. Touching on what you said, Jonathan, you mentioned part of the school committee's role is negotiating contracts.
Yeah.
Almost all of the current school committee candidates have criticized the various parties' tone and communications during the 2024 Newton teacher strike.
Yep.
The current NTA contract will expire during the next school committee's term. If there's another strike, how should the school committee act differently next time than it did in 2024?
I think there's a really important role for the school committee to play, candidly, long before we have to engage in the concept of a strike, about educating the city, parents, voters, teachers about what's actually happening in the schools, about what the realities of the city's finances and the school's finances are, and making sure that we are having that conversation long before we get anywhere close to what we ended up with in a couple of years ago, right? I think that the fact that we ended up there reflected a broad-based failure of communication and leadership across a bunch of different channels. I continue to believe, I believe then, I believe now, that I don't think it should be legal for teachers to strike in the state of Massachusetts. And I will put everything into making sure that we don't end up there again.
Molly?
So I think we agree that communication needs to be ongoing, and I've been happy to see that the superintendent has been consistently communicating with the union more often than was happening before. But already from being in different school committee meetings, there seems to be breakdowns in that communication already at this point. So I think it needs to be made very clear what the structures are for the union members, teachers, to communicate directly with the school committee and not have to filter through the superintendent. And I think that that collaborative, inclusive approach is going to make sure that teachers feel seen and heard and feel like they have a say in the way that schools are run. They are the heart and soul of our schools. They are extremely talented and need to be heard.
Thank you. Any rebuttals?
No, I don't. Look, I don't know that I disagree with any of that. Right? I think that element of communication and being open, I think, is important. But I also think it's really important that what we're driving in the schools and that what we're teaching kids and how we're teaching them, it is not the school committee's decision what those curricula end up being. Right? But I do think it's important that the city has confidence in what we're teaching, and the city has confidence in the direction that the schools are taking. And I think that's a critical element of that.
Molly?
I don't think any of the breakdown in the communication was about the curriculum or the subjects that were being taught. I think it was the tenor in which people were being talked about, the rhetoric that was being used, even the law firm that was hired to do the negotiations. I think it was an adversarial role put upon them from the beginning, and I think it needs to be one of collaboration and respect.
Well, in the year prior to the strike, there were work-to-contract labor actions ranging from non-participation in staff meetings to being unavailable to students outside of strict contractual hours. If you're elected, how would you respond to parent concerns about those actions if they occur again during your term? Start with you, Molly.
I'll say, first of all, I remember that, and I found it to be not actually done in practicality because teachers are so concerned about helping their students. And so I don't want to out anybody, but my kids were still seeing teachers after hours and clubs were still being run. So I don't know that it was done to fidelity because teachers have the urge to help kids. But I think, again, it shouldn't get to that point. If you are seeing that there is a work to rule or work to contract, then something is breaking down already, and you can't let that go. You need to make sure that you are working towards collaboration and consensus before then.
So what I'm hearing you say is you would take a proactive approach.
Absolutely.
Prior to anything
Absolutely.
Getting there. And Jonathan?
Look, I think that our students and I think that our parents should have confidence that their kids are going to get what they need in the schools without having to rely on something happening in the schools that is not what everybody says is happening in the schools, right? So that may be true. I'll be honest with you, it wasn't that, for my own son who is in second grade, it wasn't clear to me where we were in that spectrum, but it shouldn't be that we have to rely on that as a way of knowing what's happening in the schools. I continue to go back to what I said before. I think if we get to the place that we were last year again, we have failed broadly in the background.
Okay. Any rebuttals? Or anything else you'd like to add?
I just think it shows that if it has already gotten to that point, there has been a breakdown in communication. So that is your sign that things have already gone too far. And so it should have been fixed beforehand. And if it gets to that point again, you know that you need to act very quickly.
You're all set?
I'm all set.
Okay. So finances obviously are a big issue, and sustaining NPS's budget is going to be a continued concern. So I'll start off with Chris Bresky, the current school committee chair, has made NPS budget transparency, including setting an NPS allocation baseline of $296 million, which in his view reflects true cost, rather than the current $292 million as a public priority of his. However, a larger direct allocation to NPS instead of a lower amount supplemented by one-time free cash, stabilization fund disbursements, as is done now, may reduce the city's flexibility in making allocations and potentially its AAA bond rating, which relies on various accounting ratios on paper. Is transparency or flexibility in collaborating with the mayor's office more important to you?
I think transparency is extremely important. I think that we have already gotten to the point, and we'll get to the point again, where we need to go to the voters to ask for an override. And if it is not clear how the money that we have is being spent and why more is needed, then it's very hard to convince voters to support that. So I think transparency is key. I think it's also really important to show to people who do not have kids in the system why education costs more than it used to, and the limits that 2.5 put on us. So why do we need to ask for more anyways from the city or from the voters? So I think that's clearly important, and I think that Chris Bresky's number is a more accurate one, because we need to look at the real base budget for the schools and not the one that the mayor has given us.
Jonathan?
I agree on the issue of transparency. I don't think that anybody is really served by the game that we play right now, where we try and decide on an annual basis what's actually operating cost versus what's one-time expenses, that we can carve out that way, and it's become the way that we talk about the budgeting. So I believe strongly in getting ourselves to a place where we have a clear understanding of what's involved in running the schools. As I sort of commented earlier, I think there is a really critical role for the school committee to play in helping voters understand that, working with the mayor's office to sort through where that money comes from. I think that is a much more nuanced, much more involved, much longer term, much more strategic conversation than simply demanding that the mayor change the allocation for the schools and fully fund the schools, which has sometimes been part of the narrative and part of the campaign.
So Molly, you briefly used the word override, and so I'm curious. Do you think that given the sort of what we've gone through in the past, few years, that there is appetite for an override? And if so, do you think an override could be in the near future?
I think that after talking to so many people around Newton, whether they have kids in the system or not, that it is very clear that Newton residents truly value the schools and want them to remain excellent and to serve students as well as can be. And so I think that if an override was explained and proposed in the right way, there would be an appetite for that. I think it is very hard when you have members of the school committee and city council actively fighting against an override to sell it. And I think it's very hard to sell it when you're not understanding why there is this discrepancy between the money that people are told are in the budget versus what's actually there. And when there is not that transparency, it's harder to sell. But I think that it can certainly be done.
Jonathan?
I agree with a lot of that. I think, look, I take a different, as on the campaign trail, folks have said to me, well, how can we talk about an override? The last one failed. The reality is that, we had 3 override initiatives on the ballot the last time. 2 of them were, they were debt exclusion overrides, but they were very clearly defined investments in the Newton school system, right? And voters supported those things, right? Those 2 overrides passed. The 3rd override that was an operating override that was harder to know what was in it, harder to know what it was for, required a lot of trust between the city and the school committee and City Hall, and had a lot of other things in it that weren't just the schools. That didn't pass. And so I do think, if you look at the budget analysis from when the last contract passed, we are going to have to do one of something, right? We're going to have to do something either related to the pension fund, we're going to have to do something related to an override, or we're going to have to do something related to raising private money. That's kind of it. Those are places you can go. And I do think we have to talk about all those things.
So, just based on the fact that the mayor is a member of the school committee, how do you view the role of the mayor being on the school committee and also working with you as well as the city council?
So look, I think that the mayor is a voting member of the school committee. That makes him a member of the school committee. I think that the mayor is effectively the official leader of the city. I think to the degree that the city can work together against things that, or towards things that voters and parents and community members want, I think that is what most folks are looking for out of their government, right? They're looking for a government that's gonna help move the city where they want to see it go. Look, we're in the middle of an election. Voters are welcome to vote for whoever they want to in that process, and that's how we express what our values are and where we want the city to be.
Molly?
I mean, I think in terms of the role of the school committee, when you vote on policy or things like that, then the mayor is a voting member of the school committee and has an equal say as any other member. When it comes to the budget, the mayor has a very different role than the other members of the school committee. It's not up to the school committee members to figure out the city's finances. It's up to the school committee to advocate for its schools, what the schools need. And sometimes those two things can butt heads. They're not necessarily going to be the same. And so you need to make sure that you have a school committee that's willing to stand up to the mayor and fight for what is needed for the schools, and not try to be in the business of figuring out the city's finances as a whole. And, if we take from one department to give to another, that's not its role. That may be the mayor's role, but that's a very different role that the rest of the school committee has.
Jonathan? Sorry.
I just think, honestly, that I think the role of the school committee can be broader than that. I think that the understanding of where is the money going to come from and what are the realities of what has to happen to make that happen, I think is part of the purview of what I would hope school committee members engage on. It was precisely the point of view that Alicia and Chris and the school committee took this year when they pushed back on the mayor's allocation and basically sent an unfunded budget to the city council and forced an unpleasant political conversation in the city because we weren't where we needed to be in terms of funding the schools. That was effective. We ended up with more money for the schools, right? We got within a couple $100,000 of the superintendent's ask. Was it politically comfortable and convenient for everybody? No. Was it the right thing? Absolutely. And I think about the world that way.
Molly, did you want to?
I think you just agreed with what I said, that it's a different position. You need to be able to fight the mayor when it's reasonable for the resources that are needed for the schools. And so you need to have some independence from the mayor in order to do that. And I think one of the things that Chris Brzeski did that was wonderful, that was not taken into account by the mayor, was offering suggestions of how to get that money from the city into the budget, which is, totally fine. You don't need to listen to different suggestions, but that goes above and beyond. What I'm saying is it's not up to the school committee to find those resources, but to advocate for what's needed.
You're all set?
Yeah, look, I think I was clear. My point is, I think that I agree, the school committee does not control the mayor's allocation. I agree that it is the school committee's job to advocate for what is needed in schools. I think that the school committee will always do a better job if it understands what the art of reasonable and possible and reality in the city's finances are.
Okay. This Monday, I think tomorrow, actually, the school committee will be meeting, and I think there's going to be an enrollment report that's issued. So we're seeing a decline in enrollment going forward, and there are two schools on the north side that are very concerned about what's going to happen to those two schools as we're continuing to move forward with building projects or renovation projects, and we're looking at tighter budget constraints. I'd like to know what your definition of neighborhood schools are, and a follow-up, what do you think is the cause for enrollment decline, and is there a way to address that? Let's start with Molly.
Sure. So, we saw a decline, especially in COVID, partly because a lot of independent schools were open full-time when Newton was not. And then I think for a variety of reasons, people chose to stay even when the schools reopened, and we're seeing, different demographics in the city, and people have lots of reasons why they decide not to enroll in public schools. I think that making sure that Newton is a leader in education and being innovative and inclusive is a way to draw people back into the schools. As far as the neighborhood schools, I think it's unconscionable, actually, that the areas that you've been talking about, the schools that you've been talking about, have been delayed and sort of nodded and smiled to for so long. Part of what we have to do as leaders is to have difficult conversations and make difficult decisions and explain the reasoning behind that. And just dragging your feet and not making decisions serves no one.
Jonathan?
I don't know how to define neighbor. This is like a Potter Stewart. It's like you kind of like, you know it when you see it. But I think that it has been clear to me, I took for granted, candidly, that my son gets to walk to Bowen every morning, right? I don't know that I thought about how important that was to us or how important that clearly is to voters. That is something that has been very clear on the campaign trail. It's a reason people move to the city. It's a reason they choose specific houses, is so that they can be close to the school, that they can get there quickly, and that they can be part of that local community. And I think that the move that we've made over the last sort of 15 years towards larger elementary schools, larger, more centralized elementary schools, is an example of candidly not really knowing what the city wanted, not really knowing what residents wanted out of their school system in their city. So I believe in neighborhood schools. I think the practical decisions on that are going to get governed by over the next couple of years, will get governed by the number of kids in the school and the ability of the city to afford to actually do the renovations on the schools that need renovating. But we shouldn't sell any of the buildings, because I do think we're going to need them. And I do believe that enrollment is a problem and that we need to figure out how to get it moving again.
Molly, did you want to?
I'll just add that I think that there are creative, innovative things that you can do with the school buildings to make them still part of the community, and that it is wonderful to be able to walk to schools and have your neighborhood schools, but it's not good for anybody to have a school with one class per grade. That's not good for students. It's not good for morale. It's not good for the community.
I agree.
Okay. I'm going to pivot a little. So MCAS has recently been removed as a statewide graduation requirement. Should Newton install a local version of a district-wide assessment test as a graduation requirement? Start with you, Jonathan.
I don't know. I was not in favor of dropping MCAS as a graduation requirement, not because I thought we needed it per se as a graduation requirement, but because I do think that we need the data on how are the schools doing. And as a student who took the earliest version of the MCAS before it actually had any teeth and had any recourse to the students, it does not surprise me that the data now is that kids don't finish it. Right? The Globe reported on this a couple of weeks ago. The number of unanswered questions skyrocketed last year when it was no longer of consequence to the student whether they passed or not. So now we're in a place where we've deprecated MCAS as a graduation requirement, and we don't really know whether the things that we're doing in the schools on a day in, day out basis are improving the outcomes. So I believe that we need measured qualitative data on how students are doing and whether what we're doing is working in the schools. I think that needs to be recourse to the students so they take it seriously. I don't think that we need a high-stakes test as a benchmark for graduation to have a high-stakes test. That's not where I'm at. I just want to know how we're doing.
Molly?
Yeah, I think, our students get assessed a lot. They take standardized tests to track their progress over the grades in math and in reading. We have a tremendous amount of assessments that are curriculum-based that the teachers administrate. So I think there's a lot of data. It's just making sure that you have the right data. I think what the MCAS was originally intended to do, which is to be a comprehensive assessment system, is ideally what we should have. And I think it's actually a wonderful opportunity for cities and towns to create their own graduation requirements that match what they're hoping their graduates are when they leave the system. And Newton has put together this portrait of a graduate. And so to be able to match graduation requirements to that portrait of a graduate seems like an amazing opportunity.
Do you have anything to add? So you mentioned students get assessed quite a bit, and they get assessed based on what they're learning. In a recent Newton Teachers Association bulletin to its members, President Mike Zillis quoted an elementary educator as saying, "I have to reconcile myself to the fact that Newton is no longer a place where we teach students, but rather one where we teach curriculum." Do you agree or disagree with that statement, and why?
I completely understand that statement. We have tremendously talented teachers in Newton, which is a huge part of what has made our schools so great for so long. And in an effort, which I agree with, to make sure that curriculum and programming is consistent throughout the schools in Newton Public Schools, I think we've gone too far. Teachers are scripted and scheduled down to the minute in elementary school what they need to teach. So if they're in the middle of this amazing lesson and they think that their students, want to dive in even deeper and write more and be creative, they have to switch gears and go on to the next subject because that's what's dictated to them. So I think we have gone way too far with that. I think we need to trust that they are experts in the children in front of them, that they are given standards to teach and should be allowed more freedom to figure out how to teach that.
Jonathan?
I don't think that we should have to worry when kids get to middle school and they take their first math class as to whether or not they've all got a comparable set of experiences and a comparable curriculum experience throughout the elementary schools to know whether they belong in that class or what's going to get taught in that class. And if you listen to parents and you even talk to some teachers, that is what happens at the moment because we haven't had a consistent curriculum for a long time, right? And so kids get to middle school math and everybody looks around and we spend 2 months trying to figure out how to get everybody on the same page. It's not efficient from a teaching standpoint. It's sure as heck not equitable to our students as we think about the experiences that they've had across the elementary schools. So look, nobody in this process, not me, obviously not Molly, like nobody in this process wants, this to feel like a rote situation where you sit down and you come in and the only thing students do is they fill out the same worksheet every day. Nobody wants that. But I do think it is critical that we understand that we have a consistent experience for kids and that as you move up through the school system, we know whether or not kids are achieving. And I think that is the first thing I've staked out as a priority. I'm out of time, I'm sorry.
Molly?
Yeah, I would say I think before we jumped ahead to changing all the curriculum and to scripting it the way that it's been done, we could have spent a lot more time making sure that implementation was done with fidelity at all of the elementary schools because we have these standards that are higher than Common Core standards in our state. We have curriculum in place. So the fact that that was not getting done equally across the different schools is certainly a problem to address, but I think it could have been looked at from that lens first before going to the extreme.
Jonathan, anything last to add?
No, look, Dr. Nolan has made a priority both in her entry plan and in her actions over the last couple of years, a priority of getting the curriculum updated and making sure that it's consistent. English language started 3 years ago and generally, I believe, has been very successful. Math pilots started this fall. I think all of those things are good signs and I believe in them.
Wonderful. Well, now I think we'll go to closing statements. I'll start with you, Jonathan.
I'm Jonathan Greene. I'm running for school committee in Ward 6. I grew up here and I'm proud of my Newton education. We moved back here in 2017 in large part so that my son Adam could get a Newton public education like the one that I got and that has served me so well. I've voted in Massachusetts for most of my adult life. It tends not to make a big difference on the national stage. Being part of the school committee, being part of local government, being engaged is a way for me to give back and a way for me to give back to the community that's given me a lot. And I'm excited to do that as part of the school committee next year.
Thank you. Molly?
Thank you. I'm Molly Brodt. I'm also running for school committee. I have 3 daughters in Newton Public Schools, and we also moved here for the schools. They have had a tremendous experience despite COVID, despite the strike, despite the other interruptions. And I have made my career making sure that students get what they need to thrive, advocating for students in the classroom, in IEP meetings, with administration. I understand education from many different perspectives, and I think it's so important that we serve the students that we have in front of us. Education has to shift to meet the needs of the students today. And I think it's really important that we make sure to maintain levels of engagement and joy, and we can't just focus on test scores when thinking about excellence in our schools. So I want to make sure that we are thinking about students' needs first when we make policy decisions for the schools and make sure that we become a leader in education once again.
Thank you. I think that concludes our session. Is that right? I'm looking. So I'm not sure.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.